Hi everyone, welcome back to my art channel. Recently I've been feeling conflicted about my art style, or rather the directions, materials and themes I want to explore. I'm sure you know that feeling of wanting to try so many different media, to sketch and experiment. But how can we keep exploring without limiting ourselves, while also staying true to what our art essence is? When I sat down to sketch ideas, I asked myself a few questions, all related to my art style. This isn't just limited to how we draw, but what we draw, why we feel compelled to draw it, our motivations and inspirations, and how we choose to interpret those. While the art style and direction questions have been recurring themes in my videos of late, this portrait here has a specific purpose. I recently got accepted into the Bad Apple Artists Collective. I'm really excited because there are so many artists I admire in this group, so it feels surreal to be a part of it. This will be my very first auction piece, and the theme for the group event is Essence, as in the essence of our art. That brought on a quick little crisis of faith as my imposter syndrome reared its head and declared that I don't have an art essence, that I'm too scattered and my art incohesive. But when in doubt, opening a sketchbook and just diving in with pencils can bring back perspective. If you're new to my channel, you probably missed my whole Gothic horror illustration extravaganza last year. Spread out over several months, but then focused on October, I illustrated my favorite scenes and characters from Bram Stoker's Dracula to create a little art scene companion to the book. Looking back, I constantly felt inspired and truly involved with every single drawing and painting and sketch for that project. Here I'm returning to that, sketching ideas for a vampiric portrait painting. I first explored Gothic windows as a framing device, but then my focus shifted to just a portrait. A vampiress with a mischievous but not entirely evil look. I like my vampires either a bit tongue-in-cheek and whimsical, or truly monstrous, so for this one I leaned more towards the former. I asked myself questions that you might find helpful too. What do I love drawing when I'm free to do whatever I want? What kind of stories do I feel connected to? Which genre inspires me the most? What themes and moods do I gravitate towards? Our art style isn't limited to how we draw eyes or the specific shapes of a nose, our brushwork or line work, or even the medium and colors we use. It's the inspiration and motivation that goes into it, the why rather than just the how. At least that's what I think. The materials, color palettes and stylistic choices in how I draw faces or backgrounds, of course, are still part of that package, and I played around with those here for my experiments. I've been using gouache paints a lot for sketching lately, and I thought I'd give them a try on this toned paper. In a way, the unique paper choice is a part of my art essence too, I think. It represents my love for the subtle differences of painting surfaces, for mixed media experiments, the joy when I find the perfect canvas or a beautifully prepared gesso panel, or when my watercolors look extra brilliant on a new paper. So it seems fitting to use a handmade, toned paper I never worked on before for this art essence piece. This is a khadi paper. I've used their handmade papers before and finished pieces on them always look just so pretty. The edges elevate especially sketches, I find, as they suit the more unfinished, unpolished look. And the grey of this toned paper is a beautiful, nearly cool shade that I prefer over a muddier, warm grey, contrasting with especially orange tones amazingly. It's like a built-in complementary color for my portrait tests here. While I love gouache for sketching, it isn't my favorite medium overall. The paints can build up to look a bit chalky instead of luminous. And while they're incredibly convenient for sketching outdoors or quick color studies like this eye here, I did struggle making the colors pop on top of this grey paper. I loved adding the rougher brush strokes to fade out the painting towards the edges though, and knew I wanted to play around with that stylistic element more. For the second color test, I brought out my trusted acrylics and my favorite limited color palette, the Zorn palette. Titanium white, yellow ochre, cadmium red light, and I used a carbon black. The Zorn palette is both very limited, yet can handle a lot of variation. Changing up your blacks from ivory to carbon or from carbon to Mars black already changes the temperature of all the neutrals you'll be mixing. Or, for even more of a temperature shift, I sometimes replace my cadmium red light, a near orange warm red, to a more neutral pyrrole red or even a scarlet or crimson shade if I want to get access to pink hues. You saw me coat the paper for acrylics with a matte gel medium earlier. I just applied a very thin layer to give it additional stability and keep it from warping, as I'd noticed it buckling slightly under the gouache. I'm using a Stay Wet palette that I've been trying out recently for the first time. It's perfect for when we only have short windows of time to paint, but want to preserve our fresh paints until the next session. And as you can see, I painted a lot of this late at night after work, so having the option to clean up my workspace and return to it the next day was perfect. Acrylics can be intimidating because of their short drying times, but this palette kept my paints wet for days, even though I often forgot to close it when walking away. You may have noticed that the carbon black I'm using has a more liquid texture than the other three paints. It's from the Open line by Golden, a type of acrylic paint that dries more slowly than their heavy body ones. There's no real reason I picked the carbon black specifically as the only slow drying option. I usually just like to keep my open paints to less than a third of my overall palette, as I prefer the feel of the heavy body acrylics, but still get the benefit of the slower drying times when mixing with small portions of these special paints. The open paints are also great for details because of that mentioned more liquid texture. Perfect for precision and tiny brushes. Overall, I try to keep my Zorn palette mixes here very low-key in value. The grey paper was an amazing reference point for that. If you struggle with your colors overall turning out very light, painting on a toned surface can help get you over that blinding white of a paper or canvas and give a better sense for the midtones of a value range. I found that my comfort medium didn't let me down here. I liked the intense colors, even though the Zorn palette overall invites more muted color mixes, and the smooth finish, blending harmoniously into the coated paper surface. Acrylics are maybe part of my art essence. I like the freedom they give me, the sharp color transitions, and the endless layers. With those color studies and sketches done, I felt a bit more confident. I had my materials, my color palette and the subject, and was ready to start painting. Going in without a pencil sketch can be very scary. I quickly sketched in the shadow shapes with paint instead, taking advantage of that deep brown the cadmium red, carbon black, and just a hint of yellow ochre creates. If you're using this color palette, mixing with black can be counterintuitive at first. At least it was strange for me, as I'd heard so often that black wasn't a real color and should be mixed instead out of other colors. But it's so essential here for the Zorn palette, creating the cooler shades of our limited palette when combined with titanium white, or dark browns with the cadmium red, and even a greenish tint with the yellow ochre. In a way, this palette feels like a part of my art essence too. When I first got started with acrylics in 2021, I was very intimidated. I only knew how to mix with watercolors or inks and had little to no experience with more opaque media. That's when I discovered the Zorn palette and used pretty much only those 4 shades for the first half year or so, slowly expanding with an ultramarine blue later and learning more about color mixing as I kept adding to my palette. As I love painting character art above all else, the Zorn palette was the perfect fit for me. Portraits feel very natural with it. Back when I released my Dracula art zine, I got asked several times why I'd picked that particular story, or what attracts me to Gothic fiction and horror in general. I'm actually not even the biggest vampire fan, it's the Gothic setting in general, themes of mortality and morality and the occult that fascinate me. Crimson Peak, for example, is a movie I could rewatch endlessly for its aesthetics. I love the cinematography of both old and new Nosferatu movies. The character explorations in Interview with the Vampire, and you wouldn't believe how excited I am for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, coming out later this year. So yes, a lot of my love for this genre is in the visual trappings. But for Bram Stoker's novel, it's actually the characters around the titular vampire that made me fall in love with the story. Character art giving personality to a simple portrait or finding designs for them is so much fun, and I try to give my little vampire portrait here an air of mischief, the content look of a cat who got away with something. Maybe I also just enjoy historical costumes and settings and pretty things. The dress here is even inspired by a piece from the Met's public domain costume collection. If you like all of the above as well, I hope you check out the auction over on the Bad Apple Artists Collective this weekend. The Essence theme came with a size limit to make sure all the art is small and more affordable, and I would be beyond happy if my portrait here finds a home through the event. You can find all the links in the description. And if you like Gothic horror and vampires in general, my shop is updated with the new Dracula art zine bundles as well. For my portrait here, I really had to layer my paint. I wanted to build up those layers slowly so that the grey of the paper can still shine through it naturally in certain areas, while others are completely opaque, making that transition smoother. Compared to my eye sketches, I went for a paler, more lifeless look to the skin here. But that didn't just mean mixing titanium white and carbon black to create grey tones. Having layers of orange and yellow ochre underneath to shine through made sure the skin tone was pale without going straight to a porcelain doll. The best part were all the cadmium red details towards the end. While I am never using just pure cad red, I used a very vibrant mix for her eyes, the scars of her old bite wound, with a bit of a magical glow, and her lips. Towards the end, when I was happy with my overall portrait, I used the same matte gel that I'd coated the paper with to make my paint mixes heavier, and added small impasto details. I like my acrylic paintings to have texture both to the touch and to the eye, instead of a completely smooth surface. The background was fun in its simplicity, with an abstract crescent moon and just a few stars in titanium white. The paper is dark enough to give enough contrast for those, and I'm just really happy with the overall look of this miniature painting. If you ever wanted a tiny original piece to keep at your desk, on a tiny easel, or maybe with a simple frame, I hope you give the Bad Apple Artists Collective a look. Every month there are themed artworks and small shop events, all in whimsical, fantastical and magical art styles. My creature of the crescent moon portrait can be found there too, and I'm just so honored to be a part of this amazing, diverse group of artists from all around the globe. Do you know what your art essence is? Are you still exploring different directions? I don't think I'll ever just paint a single thing, but I do believe it's important to occasionally reflect on what we enjoy most or what we want to pursue in more depth next. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in future art videos.